What is up, everyone? I'm Jeff Lund. This is the Mediocre Alaskan Podcast, talking with Larry Jackson, my neighbor down the street, who doesn't live too far away, but I haven't seen any of my neighbors, really, unless they've been walking around. What's going on down at the end of the road there in your side of quarantine?
Yeah, hi, Jeff. I've walked by your house. You just don't acknowledge me. Yeah. Doing good. We are probably less than a half a mile from each other, and that's how good we are at quarantining here in Alaska. We essentially can live a half mile from each other and never see each other. So I think Alaskans are pretty good at this. So I'd like to welcome you to my show, which is Ketchikan, Alaska News, which we're going to explore the trials and tribulations and highs and lows of being a remote teacher, which is what you are. I really don't have anything going on in my life. So
yeah,
let's start with your questions, then we'll bounce around to my questions. I question past each other.
They might kind of intersect a little bit. I think one of the things you said that Alaskans are good at this. I think just our natural lifestyle is much more conducive to these sort of things, as our social gathering points are, at the marina after fishing, having a beer or something. Like, you're not going out to eat for 2 or 3 meals a day like you would in New York, and you're not passing hundreds of people on your way to work. So I think it's a lot easier for Alaskans to do this because, our lifestyle is it's not dense.
Yeah. We're not urban, shall we say. We're exactly. So I guess that aids, maybe that's why our numbers are fairly stable. That's not to say we're not social. We're definitely social.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that works to our advantage here in this situation. I have to note that your background really cues in the whole Steve Martin thing with the arrow through his head.
Oh, good.
From the late 70s.
Yeah.
So I do like the background.
Yeah, the zoom with the background, adding that new dimension is kind of I don't know. With the teacher meetings, people have different backgrounds. I've been Chevy Chase from Three Amigos. I've been Dark Helmet from Spaceballs.
Oh yeah, perfect.
And then there was one, I got a team photo of Lord of the Rings, and then I backed way away from the screen, and so my head was just barely in there next to Frodo. So just little things, I think one of the biggest adjustments for me has been, as a teacher, I don't want to say like I put on a show, but there's a level of performance and engaging the kids. And so not having that, I guess you would say that I'm not getting enough attention, but, just that little bit of humor, it's different.
So are you guys, I'm out of it, and I know that my daughter has a morning session with her 3rd grade teacher for about a half hour. They do some show and tell. She reads them from a book like she normally would. So there's some normalcy there. She gets to see her other classmates. You guys at the secondary level have multiple classes. What's the lay of the land on this for you guys? And I do understand that they're not really holding kids accountable for work right now, but just give me a little lay of the land.
Yeah, it's and as a non official spokesperson for it.
Yeah. Please qualify all of your statements.
Yeah. Well, we can even talk about that. We've talked in my when I was getting my master's in journalism, we talked about how careful people have to be when they are being interviewed, and the angles and stuff. But yeah, the first week, 2 weeks was just about making contacts. I think at the primary level, kids need that sort of structure, and that's vital for them to have the structure. Whereas at the high school level, some of these kids they might not have that same connection. Things might be impacting them emotionally more. So just making those connections and emailing kids and, even texting some kids that you have a rapport with, and, just checking in. There's some kids who it's difficult for them to cope with, how the basketball season ended, or not seeing their friends and not being able to be social. And so the main thing was just meeting the needs of those kids on that level first. And now we're going forward with activities that aren't going to be graded, but, keeping that academic, that brain function thing up, and moving forward. So it's weird. It's difficult, but, it's our job, not only as teachers, but as people.
So you're meeting some essentially as a staff, let's say, and then you're doing some interacting with students at a personal level, and that's kind of how it breaks out in your day.
Yeah, we have a staff meeting to start the day, a staff meeting to end the day. In between, we meet with two of our classes per day for 20 minutes. Last week, it was just meeting with our advisory kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then this week we're actually meeting with classes, and it was just kind of talking about how things are, explaining what's going on, and then have some activities that are relevant to the course, but not new content. Because there's a lot of kids who don't have the same access. As excited as I want, I'm ready to go, because part of the morning stuff is researching other distance learning models and other articles and how other school districts are doing it. And so you get really gung ho, but then you think, oh, well, if half my kids can't listen to a lecture, can't access that, or, they're sharing, their younger sibling has to Zoom and their parents are working from home. It's a pretty complex thing.
Right. What, do you have many seniors in your classes, and how are they feeling with this?
It's really tough, because some of them, they're really pretty upset they don't get to have all that, symbolic rite of passage stuff that comes with end of senior year.
Right.
Not going to end on their own terms, which is tough. And as an adult, you can't look back or you can't tell a kid, oh, in 10, 15 years, it'll be fine. Like, it's going to be weird. And, they will not have what everybody else got to have. And so that's going to be there. So it's hard to get a kid to kind of get that, say, hey, at least you're healthy. It just, words don't really do much. But
anyway, you probably have the spectrum of reactions. Probably some kids see it as kind of early release from prison, summer mourning that they didn't get to do prom or whatever, and then all the range in between.
Yeah. There are some kids who, by the time they're a senior, they're ready to kind of get out in the world, do their thing, whether it be in the vocational field or, just get off to college. And so for some kids, I think your senior year is kind of weird, though. Some of those kids start off the year and just wishing that it'd get over as soon as possible. But at some point during the year, they start to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. They're like, wait a second here. I was all gung ho for it to end. And so now, wait, I'm not sure. So, that for them, and then what type of world are they going into? If they are going vocationally, and they weren't going to do college now, well, what's that vocational field looking like? And if they are going to college, what is that going to look like? So it can be pretty rough. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to be there for the kids and just talk out these things if they're willing to chat about it with us.
Yeah, I think, as an adult, you tend to, your life gets kind of, you forget 90% of it. So you realize that, that month or so in April, when I was a senior, I don't even remember that anyway. I mean, I went on to go to college, or I didn't, whatever, and life played out fine. But you just can't compress that knowledge into a 18-year-old's brain. It just can't. That information can't fit into their brain right now. Is that kind of the takeaway?
Yeah, you got the lack of development of the brain on one hand, and then also for some of the kids, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to them, so they're not really sure how to process it. They don't have that context. For some kids who don't have stuff, and then school provided that social stability. Now with that being gone, and then like a family who was fine, economically, but now they don't have their jobs. All of a sudden, you've loose, and then how many more families will be added to, the poverty level, and that's just that's such an added stress for the kids at home, and it's if you're a senior who's going to graduate, whatever that looks like, and you can still go off to college, then hopefully they'll appreciate that things are way better for them than the family who was maybe impacted by the sickness itself.
Yeah.
And then maybe with the economic fallout of this.
Do you, in your current curriculum or classes, do you have a contemporary issues class or something that would even actually address some of the current issues? Didn't you teach media?
Yeah, I teach 2 periods of freshman English, sports lit, science fiction lit, and then journalism.
Journalism. So that's what I put together the word.
I always incorporate my freshman level. We incorporated some nonfiction, some journalism reading in December.
Wow.
Just kind of a, what's the audience? What's the purpose? Why would someone write this? What might someone else say? Just kind of that sort of, here's some nonfiction. Here's this information. What is this information trying to get me to do? Is it appealing to logic? Is it appealing to emotion? So I've incorporated that as part of the, just part of the yearly, hey kids, this is also an important part of the reading understanding. The science fiction lit, I try to connect with reality as much as possible, just because makes it more real for the kids. I think that's one of the skills that a lot of teachers do is, well, why does this matter? We happen to read 1984 and Fahrenheit 451. So there's a lot of connections that you can make. And then for
real life parallels, essentially.
Yeah. And it doesn't even matter what side of the political aisle you're on. Like you can like these sort of things are, no one has exclusive rights to making allusions to 1984. And then sports lit has been, we were talking about this before spring break. Because at that point, the NCAA was going to go forward with the tournament, but not have crowds. And so we talked about, if you were elected as the one person who could go to the game, we kind of laughed about it because,
right.
You're not going to be a crazy fan at this. And so it was just in that sort of, this is really weird and asking weird questions.
The subject of, well, how now you have this subject in society of what is essential. And did that come up with sports? I mean, is this?
We talked a little bit about, and again, this was early March, and things got really crazy toward the middle and late part. So we weren't in class when things were really those sort of terms,
right?
Social distancing and the essential jobs, that wasn't really part of our vocabulary yet.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
But we did talk about how sports create some level of normalcy, and we talked about how important the Miracle on Ice was in '80 when historically speaking with the Russians, and how we weren't winning much, and the '70s were, a pretty rough time economically, and the Russians were so much better than us. So to have this, it was like, it was a we. I talked about President Bush after 9/11, throwing out that first pitch and the fact that it was a strike. It was a whole bunch of, that, and then Mike Piazza for the Mets hitting that home run. And it was just sports as a symbol of normalcy. And those things were really important. So we talked about that before we left. And now, we're looking for that. Whenever it does come back, that will be a strong sign.
Well, I've seen quite a few stories where these professional athletes have really, in some ways, stepped up to the plate, acknowledging the kind of working class man in the stands by paying some salary. I don't know if that's still going. Obviously, it only cannot last so long. But the one thing that occurred to me early on with this essential worker, I kind of joked because the state put out this, stay at home, only essential worker should go to work kind of thing. And I kind of, without even reading the directive, said, well, us fishing guides, we're obviously not essential. I mean, this is just a sport related tourism thing. Well, then it comes out a week and a half later or so that, yeah, well, we are, they designate us as essential. And I think it was mostly on an economic kind of deal, but
that's the word essential. My job is essential to my economic well-being and for my family too. And so, it's people will take and interpret and try to fit. And I think with the spring black bear closure for non-residents, people were looking at, hey, this is essential. It's essential to the local economy and it's essential to me, which is different than maybe, what is the absolute necessity when it comes to this state running. But it's very subjective, and you could make a good argument that I am essential because I represent this, and without me, the economy of the city goes down. But yeah, it's crazy. It's
yeah, it will be interesting to see. I think obviously I have a business, two businesses that are essentially only tourism related. But this town Ketchikan was really built on a resource extraction kind of model, and I think it's kind of interesting because tourism has taken so much limelight, shall we say, in the last 30 years. You've seen you don't get there's not a lot of what I call curb appeal to a cannery,
Yeah.
So this year we may see that curb appeal reemerge for the cannery because, hey, these are jobs that feed people.
Yeah.
And they have to go, and the fishermen have to go out and catch them. So I'm interested to see how that plays out if the canneries do work, and I've heard that they are making plans to bring folks back into town and ramp up, and guys go out and catch. And the kids that when I was a kid, a lot of people, when college age kids would come back and work on what they called the slime line, and it'd be interesting to see if people that used to work in tourism now are open to actually working back in that cannery situation.
Yeah. I was, as crazy as it is right now, I was thinking back to things that aren't the same, but might have some sort of comparison. I remember in 2008 when things were crazy, California, where I lived in California, was just south of the epicenter of the housing crisis. And like things were terrible, and they were cutting teachers based on tenure. So based on when you signed your contract, if you had signed it a second after someone else, then it was just when you signed it. And we lost, I think, 2 English teachers at my high school, and I happened to be high up on I'd only been teaching for 4, I think, years, and yet I was high enough on the tenured list where I got to save my job. But you just saw how this young, enthusiastic generation of teachers got cut. And that was as a result of that. And so I looked at this and I thought, oh man, this is crazy. People losing their jobs. What are they going to do? And I thought, oh, okay, well, how similar is this to 2008 when you had the housing crisis, people lost their homes, and, new person fresh out of college, they're a new teacher, they lose their job as a teacher.
Well, I think this is
so.
could be
My
worse.
question for you is, how does this compare to when the mill closed down, and then how does this compare to 08, 09 financial?
Yeah, so those are about 10 year. I think the mill closed in 97. Then you had 08, and now you have 20. So you're talking about 10 10-year increments there, intervals. And I think they were all economic hits. Although there's a little bit of a underwave through that whole period of this growth in tourism. So, as the mill was, that was 500 or so related jobs, substantial year-round jobs. We took a little decline, but a lot of people did diversify and stay within the community. So there was a little bump, and then you got 08. Tourism kind of, it flattened, but it kept growing. It might have dipped a little bit there, but you had that overall capital move kind of continue to grow. This is a little different because the tourism that's kind of undergirded these, fluctuations is the one getting capped off at the knees here. I mean, this is substantial that we could actually see a year where there was actually zero cruise ships in town. And I can't remember a year. That was probably in the mid 70s was probably the last time there was no cruise ships here. They've been coming since the 70s. So
it's at the point where there was over 1 million.
Yeah.
Like, this is substantial. When people talk about, well, tourism, it's not like, if you have 1 million people that are coming up for the tourism for a town of, what was it, 12,000 if you Ketchikan and outlying areas, that's massive.
Yeah, no, it's I haven't heard the number as a general economic number, like 500 million or whatever, but I know that they say the average person in Ketchikan that gets off the ship is call it $150 a head. So what's that if you had 1 million people? Is that 150 million?
I'm not good.
Something to that effect. Maybe it's more. I haven't done the math, but so that's a substantial hit to all aspects of your economy. Now, we're going to get hit twice because obviously oil prices have gone down. So any oil revenue to the state is going to not trickle down, shall we say. So that's why I brought up this whole commercial fishing thing. That might be going back to, here's a baseline economic industry that undergirds our community that we kind of take for granted a lot of times.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How much have you been reading about this? When I got back from California during my 2 week of isolation, I had a buddy, your neighbor, Dave White, who was shopping for me. He'd come by. He would drop off the bags of groceries with the door still shut. And then I wrote a check for him, and then I vacuum packed it and I wiped down the outside of it, just to make sure. And I never had any symptoms or anything, but you gotta do you can't assume that just because I feel good. So, taking it seriously. But during those 2 weeks, I did a lot of reading online, and you could just read yourself into this state of hopelessness.
Yeah.
There's so much out there. Even if you're looking at, I'm not even talking about the crazy, far left, far right conspiracy type stuff. I'm just looking at, your basic, read the Wall Street Journal, read the New York Times, and just seeing, man, this is something else. So how have you been able to stay informed, report, but not let it impact your mental well-being?
Yeah, there's what I call early adopters, kind of laggards, and then there's just the deniers. And I tend to be on and I'm not saying this, I'm not bragging, but I tend to be on the early adopter terms of technology, news stories. I kind of a little bit of I like news. I listen extensively through the day. But but I was starting to get information primarily from YouTube videos. And I think there's some good stuff out there. There's obviously some wackadoodle stuff you have to be aware of, but the kind of on the whole coronavirus thing, when it really started to dawn on me, and I'm not saying that I was even early adopter here per se, but was when the cases came out in Kirkland. That was like a Friday night, and I think in late April or early March. And it dawned on me, that's, an hour and a half flight from Ketchikan. Oh, we could be seeing this in a matter of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Then my brain started turning. I mean, it was within a day I started realizing, the information I was gathering was that this could be transmitted asymptomatically. That we could have that already here, And then that's all kind of come true, that they're thinking these cases there in the Puget Sound area were actually there for quite a while,
mm-hmm.
and that the deaths were kind of the lagging aspect of it. So anyway, back to your question, I think of information as invigorating. So as a person, when I read something and I take it in, I see it as liberating to some degree. And maybe it's an ego thing. I think now I know more than somebody else. I don't know what the hell it is, but so that's why that's why I like to get out there and consume, because I feel like, this kind of arms me. It kind of gives me the ground in which I walk on. So it doesn't really depress me, really.
Yeah. I early on, and I was having conversations with kids about this. My one of my TAs, just about, hey, where this is going, what it could mean, and hey, it's gonna get here. In what form, who knows? And that was in February, because you knew it was gonna happen. I bought 2 masks in mid-February, and I was like, just in case, just in case. And then when you hear, the more you read, the more you're more in tune to whether or not the information you encounter doesn't make sense or not. So when they said, don't wear masks, they're not going to help you, you're like, well, that's okay. I'm not really sure, what and the underlying was, well, don't buy them because we need them for healthcare workers. Okay. That makes some sense. But rather than post something and then say, is this true? You can kind of work it around in your brain first and think, okay, I'm not even going to bother sharing this, because that's usually what happens. Some whack conspiracy, you share first, think later, and that's emotion, not logic. But when I was in California, you talked about things being here before. A buddy of mine, he directed me to, his dad works in a company who does dealings, in California, and just how important China is for all of, or so much of our manufacturing. And 430,000 people had traveled between China and the U.S. And you're just like, oh yeah, for sure.
And I hadn't heard that number. That's a really stark reality there.
Yeah. And so like, that makes total sense. And he said in December, he was insanely ill. And he's a pretty in shape guy. He said that he got to the point, they gave him medicine and say, if you don't get better in 5 days, once you're done with this medicine, then you're going to the hospital. So he's one of those who looks back and think, I think I may have had this. If this is as bad as it was, and, people are now looking into testing people who think they had it before, and maybe in some areas of California, their numbers haven't spiked as much. And maybe part of that is due to their population density isn't what it is in New York, but also maybe it's some areas they have that herd immunity, because it's already kind of worked through people. And
sure.
Nothing off the table. That could make sense.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Obviously what's your reaction to the news that we're just basically school district, the governor called off the year? We kind of expected it. I did anyway. I'm sure most teachers kind of thought this wasn't going to happen, but or was going to happen. So what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think we knew what was going to happen. And I think there's anybody who is a teacher, administrator, governor, politician, anybody, even comedians, like we have to be so careful in what we do, and because everything is digitized. And so if you are the person who happens to say something wrong, that's coming back to haunt you. And
Right.
so I think that even if there was good information, and even if we went no new cases, we haven't had a new case in Ketchikan since the first, and I don't want to jinx it, but even if we didn't have a new case,
You have the control to jinx it, by the way. You are the one in town.
yeah, I'm the only one who mentioned that. I think even you have to make that call just out of the safety of the parents and the kids. I think you have to make that call. It's not at all surprising. But I think it makes it really difficult to govern, because there's so many people who are
right.
You have to worry about the PR stuff. And so the pulse of the reaction is at the heart of every decision that policymakers are making. And even what people are saying, everything is going to be taken out of context. And that's it makes an interesting role of the media as the fact checkers, as the checking of the government, which is why, the First Amendment exists, for the freedom of the press to be able to do that. And so ethically, is it to just report what happened, or to bring up all these things when the politicians don't know? They have no clue.
We're all armchair epidemiologists now. That's what I say.
Oh my gosh!
Just like Monday quarterbackers.
And I think everybody has to take that into account, and that's
my fact checker right there.
Yeah, there it is, Bridger, the man.
How did you get on?
Hey, Bridger.
Where's the cat?
I don't know. You better go find him.
Yeah, and I think it makes it difficult, because it makes it difficult politically, because if you are of a certain political background, you can't be caught saying, hey, you know what, this person did a pretty good job, because then that makes you not a true Republican, Democrat, and that's really unfortunate. We're looking for that, even now, in a time that we could be really coming together and say, hey, man, let's get through this together. We're definitely seeing that you can't say that this person did anything right because they're on the other team. And I was hoping that we would bring together, but it doesn't really look like that's happening.
The dilemma I'm seeing now play out is, let's say here in Ketchikan, we have these no active cases, hey, we all clap ourselves in our back and say, we've done a good job. We've all hunkered down, done our thing. But then you have somewhere else in the country that is still fighting this. It's almost the epitome of an all for one, one for all type of proposition here, because because of the virulence of this disease, you just can't say, okay, we're good, and then open up your community, and then it could re-enter some way. And so that's I think going to be the next question, is how do we do this as a group? We did it well as individual communities per se, but yeah, I don't know where that's going to end up.
Yeah, I think that's why I like I don't know if it was New York Times or if it was Wall Street Journal, but talking about the power of the governor and how they're governing their individual state based on what makes the most sense, which is great. But then other people are judging what other states are doing. Washington has shut down sport fishing, and California is looking at doing that too, because part of the, I can't work. They're going to go out and they're going to go
recreate,
go fishing, go recreate. And they might not come in contact with many people, but you have such a huge population. The more people who do that, you're running the risk of making these encounters that, the numbers are low because what you're doing is right. In Ketchikan, we got a lot of people who are going to, going on hikes, going on walks, that are launching their boats, that are going out, but you don't have a massive volume.
Right.
So you're not having people who are driving from 50, 100 miles away. It's just within the community that people are doing that. So it appears to be working for us, but yeah, once we start to, if we open the airport because things are good, we're inviting that potential for people to come back in. Or, it's still somewhat open as long as people quarantine, but as long as like, oh, well, let my friend come up and, they have so it's going to be fine. You come on up, fish, do whatever. And then everything that has enabled us to keep the numbers low, we threw out the window. So it'll be interesting to see where we go.
Yeah, I did go through. I got the announcement about a week ago from the Fish and Game where they said us guides were essential, where I had to kind of go guffaw a little. But essentially what they were saying is that if you have a lodge or some kind of a business, even like mine, what you have to do is still you can actively operate, but you have to adhere to these health guidelines, which were the 14-day quarantine. You have to ensure the safety of all your staff or the community you operate out of. So even though it's open, you're still restricted by some of these governing kind of mandates. So it's not as easy as it sounds. Oh yeah, you can come up and fish, but you have to be quarantined for 14 days. Well, realistically, how does that work? I mean, it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
You have to still go either get fuel for your boat or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that if they're up here for 2-week quarantine, even though they're only going to be here for 5 or 6 days or whatever, but there's someone within the lodge who has to go into town to get supplies. And so it's just an interesting situation of, okay, well, this person is quarantining at my lodge or my place. And
I'm not.
What's that?
But then I, as staff, am not. Then is it really a quarantine?
Yeah, exactly. So it can get in through that person to somewhere. So I think the first thing of being conscious about this, and I think when we do start to open things up again, we have to have that level of consciousness. Like, let's keep the 6-foot thing going. Let's keep the mask thing going. As long as we do that, we can keep the numbers low. But that's the only way we can function. If we just run out of this thing and we're close and we're big meetings and we're going back to movie theaters and we're doing no mask, we're just going to, we not only will suffer the wrath of the virus, but also will have the economic, ruin of before. So, in a free country, we have the opportunity to do stupid things. So if we don't want to ask the government to be more involved, then we got to show that we're responsible enough to be able to adhere to the warnings, do what I'm supposed to do. And then we don't have to have draconian laws.
What's that? I think of that saying, with great freedom comes great responsibility. What is it?
With great power comes great responsibility, something close to that.
Well, that's free. You could use the word freedom in there. Yeah. With great freedom comes responsibility to, act accordingly, so, yeah, well, yeah, I don't think we're going to crawl out of this as quickly as we came into it. It seems like at some point we're going to have to actually know. I think they're doing this in one of the Southeast Asian countries where you're getting kind of a wristband maybe, or one of those cow tags they put on your ears, that you're now clean.
And this is where a lot of the conspiracy stuff is fueled, because all that stuff happens in the interest of security, right? Post 9/11, in the interest of keeping us safe, we have the Patriot Act, which at the time was like, hey, okay, yeah, to keep us safe. But then what ends up happening as a result, we look back and think, oh, dude, that actually really hurt our liberty.
Right.
And that's putting trust in people, right? It's not the good intentions, it's the unintended consequences. And I think as a result of that, they have, my brother was saying that in South Korea, they were doing tracking via cell phone. And so if you
That's what
come in contact with someone, that could then let you know, which, yeah, okay, that's great. That's safe. That way I know if I'm in contact with people, we can track the movement of people, whether or not people are taking it seriously. That all sounds great. The unintended consequences, right? From this day forth or for the next 6 months you have to have a wristband on, or you have to have official permission, or you're being tracked by your cell phone. That's a huge hit on the liberty.
Well, we had that here. We had that kind of mentality in the States here, and it's happening this weekend, of course, with Easter, is that people are like, some quarters of the country are saying, well, you're not going to tell me not to go to my religious, celebration. It seems like an odd mentality. I get it. I get the liberty aspect of this, but I guess you are free to be make poor decisions in a democracy.
Yeah, and it's the people who push it are the ones who end up asking for more. When people talk about how the U.S. is a lot less free than other countries, and that's because there's always people that push the limits, right?
Yeah.
It's the people who push the limits that then force people to make definitions or make calls on things that end up, hurting our First Amendment, Second Rule. It's in the interest of freedom, I'm going to involve the government, and then the government is just dictating more of our lives, and it's just weird, man. But.
Well, to not drag ourselves down into a pit of despair, there is the upside to our less capitalistic endeavored summer here in Ketchikan with no cruise ships. I've heard a little bit of sentiments to the thinking of, well, wow, I get a summer to go enjoy my community and surroundings where I've usually had to go do some kind of work,
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that. I've heard that quite a few times, and I like that. I think that's going to be the next wave. We survived. We hunkered down. We survived. Let's enjoy what we have.
Yeah, there's going to be a huge economic toll, but going down on a nice sunny May morning, going to New York Cafe and getting a table,
Yeah, right.
and not feeling pushed out, and just like, oh man, this is great. It's nice, it's warm, and to walk downtown, we got that it's beautiful down there, and to just be able to, you do that during the winter when it's cold, but being able to do that during the summer, and then enjoy, it's.
Yeah. Well, then, I have friends that's what they've done for years is tourism work. And so every day, their job is to host some people coming to town, and they make a living that way, which is great. But now they're thinking, wow, I get to actually go do these things. I get to go out and, kayak or fish or, camp out or whatever. And I think they're kind of secretly relishing it, even though they may be poorer for it at the end.
Yeah.
Maybe richer in other aspects. So that's what we have to look forward to. As you can hear, there's some dissent in the background.
Is recess over?
We may have to cut this thing off.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for being on the podcast here. And what's your YouTube news website?
Ketchikan, Alaska News. I try to put out one daily story about Ketchikan, some simple aspect, 5 to 10 minute story. We have 20, 25 minutes of tape here, so you're going to get edited down to just sound bites. I'm getting tired of, that's the downside of this sequester here, is that I'm getting tired of my own face in my news. I usually go out and talk to other people, and so if I can just kind of blur my face out, and we'll hit you there with your Steve Martin steelhead through your head.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing, and I'm actually would love it if somebody else would take an aspect of this and do a few stories a week, and we'd still put them up. There's plenty of interesting things to talk about and explore in our little town. So, thanks for coming and talking to me, Jeff.
Hey, no problem. I'll wave to you from a half mile away. If I head down to launch the boat, and I'll give you a little wave.
My ramp's down. Come on, stop by. You can have a beer on my dock. That's 6 feet, and I'll give you the shrimp pot tip for shrimping.
Okay, good. I like that. Yeah, we will not record that. We don't want people knowing about that.
No.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.